Hello, friends and colleagues, and welcome to the Tourism Skillshop, hosted by State of Washington Tourism, SWT. My name is Matthew Ozuna, and I am the Destination Development Manager at SWT. I will introduce today's webinar on placemaking. Please utilize the chat function in Zoom to say hello and let us know where you are zooming in from today, whether that's Washington or Colorado or elsewhere around the world. Feel free to share your questions and comments in the chat box at any time. You can also use the Q&A feature near the end of the webinar. We'll get to questions near the end of this webinar. Marissa Petrovich will be joining us today. She's new to the State of Washington Tourism team. She is the Industry Relations Coordinator at SWT. She'll also be working a lot with our grant program. So you'll interact with Marissa via grants or the Tourism Skill Shop, maybe even the Indigenous Tourism Support Program, the Rural Tourism Support Program, or definitely if you come to our State Tourism Conference in October. Like I said, Marissa will monitor the chat and help address questions from the audience near the end of the webinar. Let me tell you more about this webinar series. The Tourism Skill Shop is one of many industry educational programs from State of Washington Tourism. This webinar series will engage with colleagues across the tourism sector and broaden their industry knowledge, skills, and network. Each webinar will highlight a specific issue or skill for tourism professionals to ponder and discuss with industry experts. SWT will monitor or will host live webinars of the Tourism Skill Shop on the third or fourth Thursday of every month from 10 to 11 a.m. These webinars are free and open to all tourism stakeholders. The webinars will also be recorded and shared with registrants as well as other users on the SWT YouTube channel. For Tourism Skill Shop and other industry updates, visit the SWT Industry website, sign up for the Industry Update newsletter, and follow SWT on LinkedIn. Tourism stakeholders may also join the SWT Facebook group for further discussion on topics related to the Tourism Skill Shop and other industry news, issues, and events. Now, folks, I'm excited to talk about placemaking, the subject of today's webinar. It's a fascinating concept. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do, but placemaking is an innate human behavior and serves as a foundation to understanding how people interact with places. This webinar will examine placemaking within the context of destination development and promotion with destination marketing and management expert, Amy Cassidy, and tourism scholar and consultant, Derek Schimmel. Amy and Derek will teach webinar attendees how to inventory and assess tourism product in destination communities, engage with stakeholders, and highlight intrinsic qualities of these communities, those things that make these communities extra special. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about Amy and Derek. Amy is a veteran, an industry veteran of over 25 years with over 25 years of experience, passionate about helping communities thrive through outdoor recreation and responsible tourism. As a subject matter expert for the Colorado Tourism Office, she has led statewide outreach and engagement and education efforts. Her work spans strategic planning, placemaking, and sustainable outdoor recreation management. Amy excels at bringing people together to shape vibrant destinations, driving community engagement for major initiatives like the Durango Mesa Park Foundation and Eagle County Open Space. Her expertise helps communities balance residents' quality of life, economic growth, destination stewardship, and authentic visitor experiences. Amy, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the Tourism Skill Shop. And Derek, a good friend of mine from graduate school at George Washington University. So Derek, always a pleasure to see you. Derek was, or is, or has been a passionate storyteller and uses storytelling as a means of building unique destination management solutions. As a consultant to government ministries and tourism bureaus in the US, Europe, and the Caribbean, he has collaborated on several destination development plans and initiatives. Most recently, Derek has served as a consultant to the Colorado Tourism Office and other DMOs around Colorado. Prior to a career in tourism consulting, he built a business as a real estate broker and property manager, brokering over 20 deals a year for investors and managing a portfolio of short-term rental properties. Derek has visited over 60 countries professionally and leisurely, learning from, working with, and gaining the trust of tourism stakeholders across the globe. Derek and Amy, I'm looking forward to our conversation and your presentations a little later in the webinar. But in the meantime, I have a few slides of my own. I have an agenda slide. Marissa, how about you show us that? So we just finished with introductions. Folks, I'll kind of give you some working definitions and basic examples of placemaking before I turn it over to Derek and Amy. I'll also give you an opportunity to get some extra help. If you can't take on the strategic planning and placemaking on your own, State of Washington Tourism has a grant for you, Tourism Regeneration Grant. It's new. Well, it's new to this year. We had it last year, but we do have enough funds to reopen that grant program this year. And like I said, Amy and Derek will kind of narrow in on placemaking, destination development, and promotion, and specifically how those things relate in Colorado to Colorado communities. At the very end, we're looking for your discussion questions and an engaging discussion with all the folks on this webinar today. So Marissa, I think we'll go into my slides. Placemaking, folks. This is a fascinating subject. I kind of knew about it. Everyone you probably heard this buzzword before, but if you've taken time to actually read academic papers or talk to tourism consultants about this is kind of a very simple but very fundamental concept that every destination professional and tourism advocate or placemaking advocate should really understand. And you should understand that it happens organically, but it's also carefully designed. And that's some of the stuff that we'll be talking about today, especially when it comes to destination planning and policy work. We are political animals, we are social animals. So, we have our own cultural biases in how we understand the world and how we interact with it. And that's kind of what placemaking is in the organic sense. So sense of place also includes culture, memories, traditions, all of those things as it relates to a geographic space. So placemaking organically, sense of place, those two are all very closely connected. However, people like us, destination professionals, also use this in planning and policy work. So this is very important, not only for residents, but also visitors. I mean, you hear of urban planners and policymakers in that sense, but we can also utilize it right here in the tourism sector. I should also say that, there's a happy medium. Usually places kind of fall somewhere in between organic placemaking and carefully thought out and carefully designed placemaking. Maybe some smaller destinations or destinations that are off the beaten path or that aren't destination communities are probably more organically come around to placemaking as opposed to destination communities geared for visitation. I should also say that there's also conflict sometimes, and who gets to kind of take over the narratives of a place. Folks, all tourism stakeholders, whether they're residents, visitors, business owners, elected officials, environmentalists, they all have a say in how the place is understood and conveyed to others. So Amy and Derek will kind of get into that balancing act later on in the webinar, but keep in mind that's very important to kind of bring all of these people to the table and have a robust discussion on why place matters so much to these people. Okay, Marissa, next slide. So I mentioned sense of place, but there's another concept that I've learned over the years, terroir of place. I'll be talking and mentioning two academics in my slides, Stephen Smith and Stephen Thorne. And terroir of place, if you can kind of relate terroir, excuse me, of to the viticulture industry, placemaking is to tourism as terroir is to viticulture. And so I think this is a great example for you folks out there to kind of utilize in your communication and kind of reiterating this concept to your tourism stakeholders. Just as there are so many elements that comprise terroir in winemaking, so is the case in destination planning and policy as it relates to placemaking, especially when we're talking about histories, cultures, peoples, politics. All of those factor into how we interpret and interact with a place. So once you kind of can capture that and then market or capitalize on this sense of place, promotion and marketing comes into play. And so that's really important, and not just kind of advertising, but traditional storytelling. And I think about traditional storytelling with guides and outfitters and having an indigenous tour guide or a cultural tour guide or an arts curator. I mean, something like that. It could be very powerful on a guided tour in a visitor destination. Print, video, graphic design, social media, all of that stuff is also very important. I believe Amy has more of a background in that than I do, and she might talk about that a little later. Next slide, Marissa. I want to kind of leave you with this quote. I think this is a great quote that kind of summarizes placemaking, cultural heritage tourism, cultural-based tourism with Stephen Thorne. I also have a visual aid in my next slide that I'll show you, but I think this kind of quote touches everything. How do we capture and capitalize on a sense of place? Well, Thorne puts it this way. It's about encountering a destination's history and heritage, its narratives, plural, and stories, its landscape, its townscapes, and perhaps most importantly, its people. It's about discovering what makes a destination distinctive, authentic, memorable. It's about the experience of place. Accordingly, place-based cultural tourism identifies and then capitalizes on the unique cultural character and sense of place that distinguishes one place from another. So find that, capture that, and own it, and be good caretakers or stewards of this place as it relates to destination management. Okay, Marissa, I have one more slide. Yes, I wanted to share all of this with you. This is just a great visual aid of how everything interconnects. I told you the complexity of all of these elements coming together. Thorne breaks it down into 5 categories: human heritage, agriculture and industrial heritage, the arts, cuisine, natural history. Once these things are in place, there's tourism, our experience, value-added experience, how visitors interact by themselves with the tour guide, and how they kind of better understand or put together their idea, sense of place from a visitor perspective. All of that comes together as one unique whole sense of place at the end. And there's all these interconnected webs of experiences and things. So I think this is a great diagram to leave you with. And if this is kind of too much for you, I can tell you that there's a grant out there that can help you with this consulting project, placemaking, and destination planning, strategic planning, destination stewardship work. So go ahead, Marissa. I will share a few slides with you on the Tourism Regeneration Grant. Folks, we have enough money from all of our other grant programs to bring the Tourism Regeneration Grant back this year. In the past, we really focused on tourism infrastructure, outdoor recreation, festivals, events, training programs for visitors, and customer service. There's other things as well, but those are kind of what has really kind of garnered a lot of our attention in the application process. Just a quick reminder, you have to be a nonprofit. These can't go to businesses. So local government, tribes, chambers, destination organizations are all eligible to apply. Next slide. I don't know the exact amount for this grant program. We're still kind of collecting all of the grant funds from other programs that were not expended. So we'll have a better idea probably by the middle of April, late April at the absolute latest. But we really want to kind of get this grant program up and running These funds are used with federal dollars, and they will have to be spent within this calendar year. So a lot of the programs that we're looking for have to be shovel ready. You just have to kind of pull the trigger and find a vendor, consultant, or whatever else to get these funds flowing. With this grant in particular, we do pay special attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So keep that in mind in the application process. Next slide, Marissa. Like I said, these are federal dollars. They have to be used within this year. You have to have UBI numbers and registered UEI number in SAMS.gov. When you contract with a vendor, these vendors have to be reimbursed. You can't pay them up front. And then really important, again, folks, these are federal dollars. We're under a lot of scrutiny. Everything will have to match. We'll have to have receipts and invoices. And lastly, these funds cannot go towards staff salaries. Next slide, Marissa. Here's just the grant criteria. We'll have another webinar probably in late April or early May to talk about this grant in greater detail, how the applications will be reviewed, and again, the total amount of grant funds available for this program. And is that it for me, Marissa? I think that's all. Okay, I will turn it over to Amy and Derek.
Hey, everybody. As Matt said, I'm Derek. You'll be hearing from Amy here very, very shortly, but we're super excited to be here today. I'm going to give you the same warning that I gave Matt and Marissa before. I recently brought home an 8-week-old puppy, so if you hear any shouting or whimpering in the background, it's not me. So to start, we're just going to look at kind of the evolution of DMOs, destination marketing organizations, as you all would come to understand it, perhaps destination management organizations. To really understand placemaking for you all as the industry professionals, we want to start here so you can understand where we were and where we are now and how we got here in between. So you can see there the orange, that first generation of DMO certainly was marketing, sales, and promotion, and research and planning. What can we do to get as many people into our destination as possible, collect as many taxes as possible, and really use kind of that economic development to build our DMO. Next, we have that second generation where you see the leadership coordination, stakeholder engagement, and destination and product development. This is where we started to get a little bit deeper into the trenches. What can we do as tourism leaders, professionals, and as stakeholders to really engage the different people that are coming there and not only bring them in, but give them that great experience that kind of celebrates the culture and history and story of the city, town, county, state, country, wherever it may be. Finally, we're in this kind of green phase now, the third generation. And this is where that M starts to shift a little bit. As it's always been destination marketing organization, this is when we start to think of it more of as destination management organization. That doesn't mean stopping marketing. That doesn't mean fewer visitors coming in, but really putting a resident-centric model first and foremost. It's not necessarily about bringing people to the destination in as many numbers as possible, but really thinking about what the residents, what the community needs, what they want, how can they engage in an organic way with the visitors so that we're building that placemaking element and not just focusing on the bottom line. So again, you're going to hear a lot about this kind of sustainability idea. So it started really as economics, but now it's economics, it's cultural heritage, it's social, I would put in there as well, and also environmental as well. It's a three-legged stool that us as DMO tourism champions have to focus on. Without one of those legs, all three of them will fail. Next slide, please. So just a little quote we found: preconceived notions are the locks on the door to wisdom. This is kind of something that myself, Amy, Matt, all of us tourism professionals celebrate. We've been doing this a lot collectively. We have many, many years of experience between us, but we don't want to go into any destination thinking we know what's going on. So often, we come in, we've seen a destination, whether it's a ski resort or an agro-tourism type destination, riverfront, oceanfront, surfing, whatever it is. Like, we've seen this before, we know what we're going to be hearing. That's wrong. We never want to know. We never want to guess what people are going to say. We want to take our experience and our expertise there, but really do our best to listen. And we celebrate that idea. And we kind of push this idea for you all as well. You are all the champions of your destinations, but we want to make sure that what you think and what you think you know about your destination isn't the end all be all. always listen, always be hearing what the residents are saying, and always be willing to change, because once we think we know something, a day goes by or a pandemic goes by, and all of those ideas are completely thrown out the window. So just kind of keeping that open mind is really, really critical to placemaking. I'm going to kind of ham and egg this one with Amy. So kind of start with the surveys here. Amy, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, so this looks overwhelming, especially for smaller destinations that maybe don't have a big budget or a lot of staff to implement. But these can be as simple as, a Google form, just to really get at some key questions of how do your residents feel about tourism? Do they understand the economic value of tourism? Are they feeling overwhelmed by visitors? Just really asking some key questions of your residents and get a baseline understanding of how they feel about tourism. Another survey that we suggest doing as well is a survey to tourism stakeholders. And in this one, we typically will ask what businesses are seeing and what their top concerns and top priorities are for the destination. And then we also are starting to implement more and more visitor profile surveys, using logic to direct visitors to a set of questions, whether they visited the destination, whether they are interested in visiting the destination, whether they've never heard of the destination. They'll see a different set of questions based on those, the response to those questions. So, there's a different best practice for cadence of when you deliver these surveys, but it really depends again on, your level of destination development, your capacity, your budget, all of these things. So, yeah, and then there's some other engagement that we find super valuable to get at really all of this background information that's so important for placemaking. Derek, you can talk about the visitor profile data that you work on.
So there's a lot of different softwares out there nowadays. We just mentioned a couple there: Datify, Key Data, Smith Travel Research, Dean Runyon. You may have heard of Zartigo, Lighthouse, Tourism Economics. There's a handful out there. Candidly, it's a little bit big brothery the way they're able to collect this data, but it is really interesting data. And what we always kind of preface to our partners when we deliver these visitor profile data studies is take it with a grain of salt. We want you to look at it from the 30,000-foot view, but we don't want you to go to your partner and say, according to this, 45,000 people visited in June of this month. We want this data to kind of help pass the eye test of what we're seeing on the ground. And it is really good. Analytics goes a long way. The data, it really is incredible what we're able to collect now, seeing kind of where people are coming from, how long they're staying there, where are they going when they leave, what county are they coming from, what state are they coming from, how does it differ in-state versus out-of-state visitation. It's really good, again, to understand that visitor profile, understand the target market, so that then when you go back to your residents and do those sentiment surveys, stakeholder surveys, visitor profile surveys, you can kind of go in and see, does this match what we're seeing? Do we want more visitorship from this place? What's a high value visitor for you? It just helps to validate some of those surveys. The focus groups, that's kind of for bigger groups. The example I give there, we've worked with different kind of ski resort destinations in the past. And this is when we'd be talking to maybe the real estate firm that manages the village in the ski resort, or perhaps the actual ski resort company themselves. Vail Resort comes to mind for us in Colorado. So focus groups, when we maybe want to really dig into a larger stakeholder, a bigger group of people that have a lot of say in what's going on there. The one-on-one interviews, really invaluable for subject matters. It's important to kind of have a list of questions going in so that we can understand the subjects that we want to know, but also be fluid. Allow yourself to have that conversation move organically. Don't kind of just read off a question list, but listen. Above all else, I think that the biggest lesson we can learn through this whole process is listen every way we can, whether it's through surveys, whether it's through focus groups, whether it's for you, the visitor profiles. Always keep an open ear. And then the workshops, I'll let Amy discuss.
Yeah, so we host a lot of workshops in various destinations. A lot of these are visioning workshops and action planning workshops. And invariably, regardless of the topic being discussed or the desired outcome of the workshop, everyone sees the value in getting together in person and having these conversations. And so as the facilitators, you know, our role is to just bring the people together and then facilitate the conversation. And again, having that agenda, having, you know, your desired outcomes, but then letting it evolve a little bit organically too, so that the community can really dictate the direction that they want this effort to go. So a lot of times we'll host, you know, an evening open house for residents the evening before, and then the workshop the following morning will be a really kind of, you know, roll up your sleeves and get to work and get some things done. So as evident throughout this entire discussion, you know, getting a broad base of information from, you know, just a wide variety of people in your destination is the key to understanding, you know, what is the goal, what type of destination do you want to be?
And Amy
And
and
one
Derek,
quick note. Oh, sorry, Matt. I was just going to address
ahead.
this comment here from Nancy Zimmerman Board on the chat. This is something we want to talk about. Our challenge is to get the surveys returned to us. Amy and I, we've kind of went back and forth on this quite a bit with different destinations. So we've seen destinations use social media. We've seen destinations use local newspapers to promote the surveys. We've seen people go
Intercept?
Sorry?
Intercept, an actual intercept survey in person?
So we've seen some intercepts where people actually are going door to door, particularly with the businesses, not knocking on doors, but, you know, going into the local stakeholders' businesses. And I would challenge you all, you know, as we're chit-chatting here, drop in the chat, what other ideas do you have for your community? Again, every community is different. We want to go in and kind of learn what the touch points are for each. Newsletters is another one, but I would ask you all, you know, as we're talking here, just drop some ideas in the chat. So that we can all learn from one another.
Some success we've seen is when you can partner with the city staff and county staff so that they can send it out through their newsletters, through their website, things like that. If your tourism department is in, you know, for example, city offices, that's great. You have access to a very large database of residents and businesses. But if not, you know, forming those partnerships and having that collaboration is key to getting broad distribution. And then honestly, it's just a lot of reminders to get people to return it. You can't just put it out there and set a deadline and hope for the best. You really do have to kind of just keep hammering it to get people to send it back in.
Yeah, surveys are difficult. I think, you know, we'll probably have an entire webinar dedicated to survey design, implementation, and data analysis. But I like your kind of all of the above approach based on the capacity, capabilities of a destination community. And, you know, I think surveys have their place, especially to kind of, you know, find broad kind of issues or areas of focus. But, you know, people, like, where can I actually hear about, you know, people's histories? I mean, or stories. Will they actually tell me all of that in a survey, or will they tell me in a focus group or a one-on-one interview, or will they show up to a workshop and interact with their fellow neighbors and you know, advocates for tourism or the environment or culture or the arts? So I think that's kind of where the magic sauce, it all kind of comes together, and you can really kind of, you know, capture that sense of place and people's passions, why they love their community so much. So good work. I love touching on all of this. Thank you.
Yeah, right. I want to just give an example too, if you want to go to the next slide, please, Marissa. Engagement with tribes and with indigenous communities is a little bit different. And I wanted to give this example, but I want to clarify that this was not work that I did. I interviewed the woman who led this effort during our statewide destination stewardship strategic planning effort. And these were sort of my key takeaways from that interview. But there was a new state park being developed in Southern Colorado. Very important park to the community, very important piece of land to the community. And so that, sorry, I just got signed out of Google. The community engagement effort to develop the management plan for that state park was really critical because the community was really invested in this piece of property. So this woman conducted outreach with 14 different tribal organizations in the area to provide input into what that management plan is going to look like for the park. And that was really the first time that that work had been done in that area. And so her relationship building was really starting from zero. And she found that doing a lot of research ahead of time, keeping an open mind, having a lot of understanding were key to just really opening the lines of communication and building that trust with those organizations. It has taken her probably 3 to 4 years to really develop these relationships. And she is very proud of the work that they've accomplished together, and also very protective of that work that's been done. She, you know, it can be undone a lot more quickly than it can be done. So that's just an example. I would not say I'm an expert in that arena, but I think it's, you know, something important to consider, that it's not a one size fits all approach to community outreach and community engagement. Next slide.
All righty. So now we are going to jump into a couple examples from here in Colorado. So the first is Ouray, Colorado. Great example with Ouray, just to start, is making sure we pronounce the name right. We've heard so many people, even inside of the destination, say it wrong. So I know Washington does have some pretty unique names there. And it sounds goofy, it sounds silly, but training frontline staff members, everybody that kind of works in the tourism industry, to say it right can go a long way. We've learned that with experience, and particularly with Ouray. So the way the CTO and Amy and I got involved with Ouray was pretty interesting. They had a fairly strong destination marketing organization, Visit Ouray, which, sparing you all the details, collapsed as a result of a couple of different things inside the community. So they came to us, the city of Ouray came to us and said, we need to kind of bring this back. What can we do to get Visit Ouray back and get a tourism organization alive and kicking inside of our destination? So it started with the restructuring. We built a job description to look for a new executive director. This came as a result of workshops, speaking with the different community members, the stakeholders, doing those surveys that we mentioned earlier. So the resident sentiment, tourism stakeholder visitor profile, kind of understanding what it is they wanted in rebuilding a new DMO. The city council approved the tourism management direction and hired a new director. The new director, kind of the director of Visit Ouray, if you will, lives within the city. So it's kind of the department of the city. There's many different ways to do that. As you all know, we see some Chamber of Commerce folks here, some different DMO people. The DMO can live in various different places. In this particular case, it was built to live under the city. And then Amy did a lot of work in building the Do Ouray Right campaigns. Amy?
Yeah, so that was something that I guess I should ask, in Washington during COVID, did you guys see a lot of visitor impacts to your public lands? People behaving just a lot of overvisitation, a lot of whether it's intentionally bad behavior or a lack of education, a lack of awareness of what backcountry behavior should look like. That was definitely happening in more established, and actually in smaller destinations all throughout Colorado. So we convened a group of tourism stakeholders, residents, public land managers, search and rescue, the local trails groups, conservation groups, to really identify what the top impacts, not just on public lands, but we were seeing behaviors in the town that were not desirable. People treating frontline staff poorly, people speeding through town, parking, just all kinds of things. So our campaign focused not just on responsible recreation, but also respectful visitation. And as a result of developing this campaign, identifying the priority impacts, understanding what kind of the general themes were, and creating messaging to help with education on proper behavior. And it's important to note that tourism is really about education and messaging. We do not get involved in enforcement of these things. So it's important to involve, law enforcement, sheriff's office, whatever that looks like, in helping with enforcement of some of these behaviors. But as a result of developing these impacts, then City of Ouray and Visit Ouray developed a Trailhead Ambassador program. And that's an example of, you see the tent there with their branded Do Ouray Right tent. They give out poop bags, wag bags, sunscreen, bag tags with, essential things you should take on your hike. So as far as engagement goes, that has been the most successful visitor engagement that they've seen, as far as just having a one-on-one conversation with the visitor from an education standpoint, from a feedback standpoint, all of those things. So this is also a touch point where they will be distributing their visitor profile survey as well. So that ambassador program came as a result of this Do Ouray Right campaign. And I should add that a lot of this implementation was funded partially by grants from the state as well. So that's really an important consideration. Next slide. So we're taking this now to the next step. We've done the groundwork. We've identified the priority impacts over the last year and a half. We've implemented the messaging. We've done a lot of promotion of the messaging in their visitor guide and their website, social media. They've created specific videos, all kinds of things to promote this responsible visitation messaging. But now we're forming an outdoor recreation roundtable, and we're going to reconvene everybody and just see how the campaign's been going, see if impacts are being lessened, if there's different impacts evolving, and just really seeing if we need to shift our messaging or reprioritize. The other thing that they're looking at doing is identifying volunteerism projects, and that enables them to ensure that visitors and residents can enjoy and protect Ouray's natural resources for generations to come. So that's very specific to outdoor recreation. The other thing that that this destination has worked on is really trying to improve communication and collaboration with the local business community as well. So the next slide shows their business partners page, and that just gives businesses access to all kinds of resources. Marissa, if you don't mind advancing to the next one. Yeah. So this is a password protected site that business partners can go in and get information on grants from the tourism office, on programs, educational resources, research, anything that they need to support and enhance their business and be more engaged with the tourism department. So this has been really successful as well for them. I think that's it. Yeah, so all of this came as a result of a strategic plan that we worked on together. And these were the main goals of that strategic plan. We're diversifying the visitor experience. They get a lot of outdoor recreation visitors in the summer. We'd like to see more people come winter, spring, fall. But visitor education and management is a big one. Sustainable protection of natural resources, yes, but also the community. And protecting staff and their cultural heritage sites and all of those sorts of things, and then really enhancing that communication and collaboration. So all of that is just key to what Matt was talking about at the beginning, as far as placemaking and involving so many different people in this conversation and determining what that place looks like. That's a lot of talking from me. So shifting gears completely, we're going to talk about a very emerging destination in Southeast Colorado called La Junta. So this is on the eastern plains of Colorado. And if you want to go ahead and shift to the next slide, they have a lodging tax there that they collect, started in like 2011. They started participating in programming with the Colorado Tourism Office to really understand, can they become a destination that visitors will want to visit, and what would that look like? And so they've participated in a program in 2018, and through a series of workshops over a 6-week period with a lot of different engagement, really identified a potential for tarantula tourism, which is super cool. They have it's called a mating expedition. The tarantulas in the fall they do almost like a migration to
Very
mate.
exciting, Amy. Mating
It's-
experience with tarantulas. I've never heard that before. I'm glad I
It's-
can go to Colorado and find that.
It's super interesting. And I will say that as far as this this tarantula tourism, they've been very intentional from the beginning to be extremely educational about it all, and not silly, not scary, not just to be very respectful that this is wildlife and we want to be respectful of our wildlife. And so that really has been incredibly successful for them, even though it's a short period of time, generally about 6 weeks in the fall. They've gotten so much international publicity, national publicity. It's been a big deal because it's different. I don't know that anyone's ever heard of tarantula tourism.
Yeah, it's different. It's designed. It's careful. I assume there's curated tours. This just
Yep,
kind of happens at
exactly.
night. I mean, so things are happening at night, right?
It
They're
happens
also
during the day, and there's
during the day.
ways to understand. They've brought in lots of educators. They've partnered with the Denver Natural History Museum. They've
Wow, good
really
job.
made it very intentionally educational. And as a result, they did, after the first couple of years, create a weekend of Tarantula Festival. And so those have guided tours. Those have a lot more kind of hands-on programming. But as a result, though, they did, and I'll get to this in the next slide, they did have some consequences, some negative consequences from visitors coming and stopping in the middle of the highway when they see a tarantula, and just really engaging in some unsafe behaviors. But they started with the tarantula tourism. They really wanted to brand their destination. They did develop a comprehensive marketing plan, and throughout all of this, they were receiving technical assistance from the state and also grant funding to support implementation. But their marketing plan, I think, is just really reflective of what we've been talking about all morning, and placemaking. And so these were the goals that were in their marketing plan. Promote tourism assets and experiences reflective of La Junta's unique character. It is a very unique destination. Develop future tourism assets to benefit the community and improve resident quality of life. So don't just develop something to attract more visitors, but make sure it's going to have an impact, a positive impact on your community. And then to grow the tourism economy authentically and aligned with community values, and not try to be, this overnight success story. So they've been very, very intentional starting back in 2018 with this work. Next slide. So they've sort of evolved in that chart that Derek shared from a destination marketing organization, and now, as a result of kind of their tourism growth, they've shifted to destination stewardship. And as I mentioned, they had some negative consequences from the tarantula tourism. So we did a similar thing here that we did in Uray with a tourism working group. It looked a little bit different because the people and the agencies being impacted were a little bit different. So we had the Department of Transportation, we had private property owners who were being trespassed on when people would chase a tarantula and hop a fence and be on private property. But the outcomes were roughly the same. We identified what was happening and how can we assist with education on this. And then we developed a toolkit and distributed that for all the partners to be able to take these calls from CNN or BBC or whomever is calling about tarantula tourism. And then the next thing I'll mention is that we're currently doing a partnership with the National Park Service that was identified during our destination stewardship planning. So they have 3 national historic sites in the region, which is pretty incredible for a very undervisited region of Colorado. And so really working hard with the National Park Service and Visit La Junta to improve collaboration between all of the tourism stakeholders, strengthen those networks, really give museums and landmarks and these national historic sites, power to become these pillars of tourism. They're historically and traditionally very underfunded, understaffed, all of these things. So how can tourism support them? And then together as a group, just help educate and help people understand the value of tourism when in a community that doesn't see itself as a tourism destination.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah. I think that is, oh, no, I just wanted to touch on one quick thing, and then I promise I'll be done talking and we'll take questions. But the director of Visit La Junta has been there since the beginning. She now, through her leadership and through participation in all of this programming, including a leadership program offered by the state, she's been appointed to a couple different boards, the one being Great Outdoors Colorado, which manages the lottery funds from the state and disperses hundreds of millions of dollars. So, just being not just intentional, I guess, with the growth of your destination, but what do you want your career to look like, and how do you want to grow through that work? And so it's very cool that a tiny little destination in a state with major resort destinations has seen this kind of career growth. So very cool. I think that's all I've got. So happy to take questions for Derek, for me, for Matt.
Yeah, before we do, Marissa, I know you're kind of gathering questions. Can you take us back to the tarantula slide? I think this is a great discussion with the panelists before we turn over to our audience today. I just want to kind of zero in on the delicate balance between when we're talking about placemaking, capturing kind of the sense of place, gathering all of these elements that comprise this unique place, tarantula tourism. And, you said, honestly, that this didn't feel kind of derived. It wasn't kind of a staged event. It was kind of came from the community. The community wanted it. It's done in a respectful manner, responsible tourism. But can you kind of tell us a little bit more? Were there skeptics? Did people think this was all kind of for a stunt, short-term gain, as opposed to a long-term commitment to essentially ecotourism, right? And the benefits from this. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the thing is that the tarantulas have been coming there forever, right? So this is something that was naturally occurring in their destination. They just had never, they talk about it amongst themselves, but they weren't sure that people were going to think this was a cool thing. And in those discussions, that did come up. Those kinds of concerns from people did come up, and that is why they were super intentional about approaching this from an educational standpoint and really bringing in subject matter experts from the Science and History Museum, from universities, and just really making this. There were some misconceptions. In fact, we called it a migration. It's really, they're not really migrating. We've changed the name now to this mating expedition. So, we've learned some things along the way and how we communicate what's actually taking place.
Well, and I like how everything comes together once the product is developed and it's vetted and it's packaged and sold, marketed, and there's anchored by a community event. Now that I assume it's an annual event, or has always been an annual event. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, folks. That's kind of, I mentioned festivals and events earlier with the Tourism Regeneration Grant. This would have been a great, project if it was in Washington State, but it really kind of gets at celebrating that unique sense of place. Like, people should come together to celebrate where they live. I mean, a great place to live is a great place to visit. A great place to live is kind of come and start a business, and it just kind of compounds from there. So great job. Derek, did you have any comments on this or anything else before we turn it over to the audience?
Yeah, I guess just one final thought, tarantula, like who would have ever thought tarantulas would bring tourism in? Like there's a market for everything. So sometimes it's good to kind of like step away, not to say that consultants are always the best answer, But use Matt's resources, use the people around you. Like sometimes you're too close to a destination, you forget like, whoa, this is awesome. People want to see this. And I think that's why the tarantulas are a great example. As Amy said, they've been coming forever. But finally somebody said in a workshop, like, like maybe we can make this into something. And sure enough, it has become big enough that Stephen Colbert Stephen Colbert talked about it on his late night show. So
Yeah, that's free marketing.
yeah,
Free
so
press.
just never like, like again, that preconceived notion, leave it at the door. We just never know what people are interested in. And I promise you all, like there's people that are interested in absolutely everything. So there's always a market.
Cool. Thanks, Amy and Derek. Marissa, go ahead. What questions do you have from the audience today?
Yeah, so I have one that I accidentally marked answered, but thought we should get to this one. It says, what qualifies as an underserved community?
Oh, we're talking about grants, grant questions. Underserved community, everything from unemployment rates to medium income, things of that nature. So that information is publicly available right here in Washington State. So you kind of want to kind of, again, know your community, have a good idea of who you're representing, what kind of challenges your community face, whether it's tourism or socioeconomic, when you apply for these grants and you take on strategic planning like this.
Awesome. All right, we have another one that came in while we were talking about surveys, and this one asks, how often does this data need to be gathered? If we have data from 2022, when should we reevaluate this?
Good question.
Want to take that one?
I would say to start, survey fatigue is real. We recognize that. So there's no magic formula. I would say for the most part, what Amy and I have done is we would do the tourism stakeholder survey annually and the resident sentiment biannually, so once every 2 years. Again, that's just something that we found with destinations we work with. But there is no formula. It's also very, very important to understand if the city, if other organizations are also doing surveys. Oftentimes we'll go in and see there's a tourism survey and the city will have just put out a survey 3 months prior. So making sure to work with the other public sector officials that may be also putting out surveys. What happens is you start to have the same people answering the same the surveys that are going out all the time, and you're not getting a lot of equity because you're not reaching out to a wider audience. So I would say quality is way more important, or quality is way more important than quantity. But it's really just a matter of each individual destination of how engaged they want to be.
Sorry, my cat's, of course, right now deciding to mess with the camera.
No worries, Marissa.
Okay.
Hey, I have another question along surveys and focus groups and workshops. So you heard earlier, it's kind of a challenge to kind of get survey responses in, but it's also a challenge to kind of get people to show up to workshops and focus groups too. How do you incentivize participation in person when nowadays it's just so easy to kind of take a survey or not on your cell phone? I mean, I should have said it earlier. It's kind of like, have a party, celebrate this place. And people are passionate about where they live and where they visit. How can you capture that and kind of turn that not only into kind of like an intellectual exercise and research and data gathering, but also, have fun and be celebratory and enjoy each other's company and get to learn from each other and more about your place.
Definitely have food.
Food, yes.
Gotta have food and keep it reasonable, right? Keep it a reasonable amount of time, knowing that people are super busy and, understanding what time of day is going to be best. We've tried a variety of different things, having them in the evening, typically less successful than during working hours. But yeah, making it a celebration, making it, understanding that, everyone's input helps guide the destination to be what it can be.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, from a variety of stakeholders, whether it's an elected official or, youth employed in the hospitality industry that are, cleaning toilets, changing beds, or in highlighting local food from a local chef. I mean, there's all of these things. Again, it kind of gets back to sense of place, capturing all of that. Derek, do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. it's tough to get people in the room at the beginning, but once you start engaging them and really knowing that they're listening, it's easier to get them there. I would add to it, like once they're there, create a safe place, an open space where people kind of speak their mind. But also know, like, whether it's you all as the tourism champions or the consultant, like, know when to kind of stop people when they're getting a little bit too far out in the weeds. But above all else, these workshops, whether it's the night before or a half-day workshop, it's getting people together. You know, the context, the PowerPoints, the exercises are really important, but just getting all of these people that work in the industry in a room together. They often kind of see each other's names. They work kind of in revolution with one another, just getting them together face to face. It's more important than ever in a world gone digital. And they start to see that, yes, they might have different opinions on certain things, but at the end of the day, everybody wants the same thing, and kind of just building that sense of collectiveness and togetherness is one of the ultimate goals. So it's a way to kind of promote the workshops as well as saying, you know, we're not going to be talking at you, we're going to be listening, and come join your colleagues because we all want to be on the same page.
Well said, like a true facilitator and tourism consultant. Well done. Marissa, do we have any other questions from the audience today?
Yeah, we have a couple questions in the chat. So I'm going to skip down, and this one is talking about interested in thinking about the intersection between placemaking and placekeeping. And the question is around will actions at the federal level, for example, destaffing at the National Park Service, have an impact?
It's already having an impact. It is. In this area, so I mentioned that there are 3 national historic sites surrounding La Junta. One is quite remote, the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. There was a visitor center in the town, which brought a lot of people into the town. That visitor center will not be staffed this summer, so that will be closed. So that will have a large impact on that community. There is the largest reason outside of tarantulas to visit La Junta is for another National Historic Site. That site suffered some severe structural damage. There's no funding available to do those repairs right now. So it's already having an impact. And that's why on that next slide, like seeing how tourism can support the National Park Service and how we can change that messaging and redirect people other places. And this is all something that we're currently working on right now. That's a great question.
Awesome. All right, do we have time for one more, Matthew?
Yeah, we do. We can stay on a little later too if folks have additional questions. I'm sure Derek and Amy would love to talk to folks right here in Washington.
Awesome.
Yeah, go ahead. What's our next question?
Okay, Jill says, my area has so many pockets of community neighborhoods that all identify and see destination differently. How do you take all of those to make a sense of place for the whole larger destination?
Interesting. Is this who was that from, Marissa?
It is from Jill. It just came in at 10:50 in the chat.
Jill from Snoqualmie Valley. Let us know what exactly your area is, Jill. But Amy and Derek, what do you think about that? If if you're kind of looking at a regional destination, which State of Washington Tourism is in the business of regional destinations, having visitors come to a regional destination, spending more time in a region, spreading the visitor spend around, as opposed to maybe just one large city, kind of getting out to rural areas, farm stays, wine tasting, cultural experiences, night tourism. Yeah, that's interesting. How do you kind of bring all these kind of competing interests to the table, these ideas of place?
It's a tough one. And I think that if myself or Matt or Amy had the answer to that, like the magic formula answer, we would be very wealthy, because every destination asks that same question. I could say, anecdotally, here in Colorado, there was a stewardship plan that was produced. It was a group of 8 different consultants that were working on it. Amy and I included in that, and we each had different regions of the state. Huge regions. I could tell you for mine, it was the northwest of Colorado. So everything from Steamboat Springs and Winter Park, massive ski resorts, to tiny Rangeley Dinosaur National Monument, Rifle, really, really small destinations, more rural destinations. Going in and having conversations in person is wildly important. Being able to hear what the different champions have to say in each different region, and then also working to connect them together. So, you know, how can a mining community in, you know, that's an hour away from Steamboat Springs, Colorado, work together? The answer there was there's a train line, and maybe we can get with different state officials and work to get that train running to bring folks in and out throughout the different regions. And then the other thing too, which is difficult because a lot of this has to do with funding, is staying with these places beyond 6 months or a year or 2-year contract. It's so important to continue engagement when you're working with larger destinations and continue to hear what people have to say, how the landscape is changing year over year. Because without it, it's really hard to develop that trust if we go in and have a conversation or two over the course of a few month period, and then this consultant or the state, whoever that may be, walks away. They kind of lose that faith and say, why am I having these conversations? Nothing coming out of it. It's very, very hard, again, from a funding perspective. But what can we do, or what can you do as the champions of these larger regions, to remain engaged every 3 months, 6 months, year, 2 years, continue to have those conversations? You know, it's a bandwidth question, it's a financing question, but those touch points are wildly important.
In fact, yeah, our work is never ending. It keeps on evolving. Destinations change, as do cultures, as do places. We all evolve. So keep with it, folks. And like I said, State of Washington Tourism can help you as much as we can every step along the way, especially with grant programs. And I do this work around the state often. So please contact me. And maybe you can contact Amy and Derek for a future project. Their contact information is here. You will get a slide deck and the recording of this webinar in an email from me tomorrow or Monday. So thank you all, folks. We've run out of time. I'll let you go, and stay tuned for our next Tourism Skillshop webinar in April on FAM tours. Take care.